Possible, So the Drama is very appropriately titled because there's actually not as much comedy in it as I would expect. The focus this time around is still a lot of action, but this time more about changing relationships. I personally prefer the comedy more, but this is still pretty good. After a big action sequence between Kim, Draken, and Shigo, come on, I gotta love anything that pays homage to Tim Burton's Batman. We discover that Kim, on top of saving the world, is going through some high school problems. The biggest one being who's she gonna take to the prom. In most movies, this would be a really lame subject to focus on, but this time around, it's about asking her best friend, Ron. Is it worth it? Are they ready to take the next step? Is that even the next step? While trying to figure out where their relationship is going, a new boy arrives to school, who seems identical to Ron, except he's good looking and, let's be honest, a little less annoying. Kim thinks maybe she doesn't have to sacrifice her friendship with Ron, but Ron is not too sure. For far too many strange things are happening, like his favorite taco restaurant is being changed, designs for toys are being stolen by supervillains, and yeah, maybe he thinks his relationship with Kim should change too. It's looking more and more like this is all part of Draken's diabolical plan, which apparently even Shigo can't figure out, which is also part of his plan, because if she can't figure it out, Kim won't figure it out. Even though, let's be honest, the plan is pretty easy to figure out. But kid show, gotta give a little leeway. And speaking of leeway, you have to give quite a bit to this movie when you find out there's not as much comedy as there usually is with Kim Possible. But to be fair, what they sacrifice it for kinda makes sense. The first film really was not story-driven, it was just an excuse to have a bunch of jokes based on characters. This one slows it down, with only 2 villains this time, only 1 diabolical plan, as well as pacing and investment that's very much like, well, a movie. This time it feels like there's a little bit more weight to what's going on, it's kind of a bigger story, it takes its time, it lets the characters breathe. Some might find that as a turnoff as they just want to see more jokes, but seeing how they thought this was going to be the last thing Kim Possible related, it actually was until they got renewed for another season, this somewhat serious tone is not a bad one to go out on. I give them credit that they actually want to make a movie this time, unlike the last one which, while I enjoy it immensely, even I kind of acknowledge it was just kind of a long episode. I'm glad that this story, while predictable, is done in a way where I actually enjoy seeing these characters go through these dilemmas. Both Kim and Ron at times act a little selfish, but it's never to a point where we dislike them. It's understandable, that age is understandable, but it's never to a point where it feels cliched or forced. It's not the thing where one person is obviously in love with the other and one just doesn't see it and they go over the top and all that stupid stuff. They both kind of don't know whether or not they want to move forward, if this is a relationship that they should be lovey-dovey about or should just stay friends. You legitimately feel the relationship they've had for years and years. But heck with all that, how's the stuff you usually expect from Kim Possible? The gadgets, the action, the one-liners? For the most part they step it up, but again in a kind of different way, a way that feels more like a movie. This opening action sequence, for example, is done much slower than most of the other action sequences, but that's done so that it feels larger. These backgrounds are about as simple as they can be, but when you notice how they're positioned and how they shoot them and how every action that they have feels like they're actually going through it, it's very impressively done. Even the intro is obviously an homage to James Bond movies, but again, they kind of give it that Kim Possible feel. I really like these shows and movies that can take something that exists, pay homage to it, but still kind of make it its own thing. It's kind of like what Heath Ledger did with the Joker. It's kind of all the Jokers, but it's also its own thing at the same time. I appreciate something that can do that very smoothly. The jokes, when they have them, are good, there's just not as many as there usually are. We still get Draken and Shigo bickering. We get Ron obsessing over something stupid and Kim with the last minute rescues and great one-liners. And I have to give credit that, at least in the movies, again I haven't seen too much of the show, Ron is not just a sidekick. He legitimately helps out, and he helps out in ways that make sense to his character. They never feel forced. I've seen this kind of character so often turn into a pain in the ass, but he's legitimately helpful. Okay, at times he can be a little grating, but for the most part I think it works. With the story, animation, action, and characters all taking on more of a cinematic tone, you get a Kim Possible movie that's different than what you'd expect, especially comparing it to the last one, but is still reasonably well done. I think I'd probably rather watch the last one for more laughs, but for a final movie, this one gets it pretty good. Figure out the sitch and give it a watch.